He said, well, you got to do what you got to do. I said, I agree. And so I went out, found an office, gave notice, and left. $34. I started this thing called Communications Inc., and the rest, as they say, is history.
Welcome to Still City Growth. I'm your host, Bill Ildenfritz. Each week, we'll explore the passions, expertise, and experiences of business owners and founders in the greater Pittsburgh area. Still City Growth is proudly sponsored by Murphy Business of Pittsburgh, committed to providing exceptional services to meet all your business needs. Let's dive in. What happens when you combine bold vision, gutsy acquisitions, and a coffee bar in your office? You get my next guest. Hearing his untold stories, I'm ecstatic to chat with my next guest. He's a five-town founder who started his first company with only $34. For over 17 years, he has also worked as a consultant to other business owners in the area of business planning, coaching, marketing, and more. He's the creator of 2 sustainability platform certifications, Green Rated, Clean Rated. And he is the owner of COMPackage. Joe Blattner, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me.
It is truly an honor to have you. Like, as I was growing up, your name and your partner's name were just like iconic in Pittsburgh. So very impressive young man, for sure.
I feel very fortunate. I really do. Really do.
Yes, very nice. Very nice. So let me ask you this question. Is it true that you start your first company with $34?
Yes, it's actually very true. I was 19 years old. I was working at a printing shop as a salesman, and he told me to start punching a clock after I'd been with them a year and a half or whatever the hell it was. And I said, I told you I wouldn't do that. And he said, no, you have to do it. Everyone has to do it. And I said, I told you I'm going to do that. And he said, but you have to. I said, I told you I can't do that. And he said, well, you got to do what you got to do. I said, I agree. And so I went out, found an office, gave notice, and left. $34. I started this thing called Communications Inc., and the rest, as they say, is history.
Very, very impressive. That's for sure. I was chatting with somebody on a different podcast, and a lot of people say, hey, make sure you're well-funded. I'm not quite sure $34 is well-funded, but look at you years later.
You know, well-funded is true. It's true, but most people, it's like a lot of things in life. When you have a big desk, you fill your big desk with stuff. If you have a small desk, you fill your small desk with stuff. Big houses, big lockers, big checkbooks. People tend to spend or, utilize whatever resources they have. So I guess if I started the business with $1 million, I would have spent the $1 million. I had nothing and I had nowhere to go. And I always said for the first 10 years of my business that if I lose it all, because the first 10 years of business is the hardest.
Right.
That if I lose it all, that I've lost $34. That was, and I always said that just to keep me in check because 10 years was tough. And my partner said, you have to stop saying that. And I said, well, okay. But it was my truth.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent advice. So let me ask you this question. I usually start the show with this question. What is the number one most important strategy for growing your business?
Burn rate. Number one, just keeping your burn rate as low as you can, because things just don't go the way you plan. And I could tell you that I've just landed a big order, but that order might not start for 90 days, and then I might not bill it for 60, and I might not get my money for another 90. And so if my burn rate was, oh boy, I just landed that $50,000 account, in fees or whatever the heck it is, so I can instead of spending $5,000 a month, you're going to be out $48,000 before you even see the first net. I mean, so you have to keep the burn rate down. That's my number one strategy. That's the one. There's another one. I learned from somebody along the way that business is about one thing. And maybe that's what you're asking. And is really what he said was business is about one number. And I said, of course, what he expected me to say is, well, what's that number? And he says, that's what you have to figure out. So, so I figured out my number. And
How did you do that?
oh, I just thought about it. It had me up at night thinking about what's that one number. And my number back in my agency days was percentage payroll to total revenue, total gross income. If that number was less than 53%, I was going to make money. And every percent it went north of 53%. Actually, I used 50 because 50 was easier to remember, right? And it was harder to reach. So I kept my payroll as best as I could. I kept it at under 50% of fees. And as long as I did that, we made money. And it was hard. I mean, particularly when it was up at 56, 57, 58%, I knew I didn't have to wait for the P&L. I knew I was losing money. So my one number was payroll to gross income.
That's neat. It's very neat. What did your partner think about that? Did he agree with the same number, or did he have a different number?
I mean, Bruner and I had, 22 great years. We were partners for 24. We had 22 great years. And I harbor no ill will at all for him. I mean, we had a great run together. He drove, he grew the business, and I managed the business. So, and when times are good, I got out of his way, and when times are bad, I said, step aside. I had a good stomach for handling hard times, because it's hard when things, you're running a multi-million-dollar business and you're losing lots and lots of money. It really, you lose sleep, and I was able to handle that. I guess I ignore it. I'm just blinded by bad things. I just stay focused on the good stuff. So when things were great, he was in control, and when things were bad, I was in control. And for 22 years, it went beautifully.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it takes a special person, though, to be able to go through the negativity. That's for sure. A lot of negativity sometimes knocks people right out of the game.
Absolutely. We acquired several businesses, several agencies or specialty firms over the years, and we acquired them mainly because they were going through hard times, and they just didn't know how to go through hard times. And we did. I mean, we bought a database shop because they didn't know how to go through hard times. We bought an interactive shop. They didn't know how to go through hard times. And those businesses made my business stronger. And we cleaned it up and drove forward. And it's just, we bought Ketchum when they were on their knees. So people don't know how to operate in hard times.
Yeah. What are some techniques you use to handle your stress?
Ignorance, blind. I'm blinded by it. If you and I got in a fight, at the end of the day, I would just ignore the fact that, we just fought. I mean, I may think about it, but I can only go so far with it. I never deal with it. I've never cheated anyone. I never didn't pay anyone. I never told them, forget it, I'm not paying you. I never did that. We did have a voluntary reorganization back in '84 when two major clients, two major jobs, they ran aground, and they said, I can't pay you. And it just devastated us. But I worked everything out with 50 vendors, and they were all happy, and I became their best customers for the next 12 months after. But, you just got to realize, I have to say, business is like a game, so you're just playing a game, and the game's for keeps, but just do the right thing, work hard at it, be honest about it. It helped that listen, I had a great partner, I had a great management team, I had people. The business became a great business, not because of Joe Blattner. It became a great business because of any of the 8, 9, 10 people that drove throughout the organization. I can say their names. Many of them have passed away since. But my job was, I always saw my role was the managing the Knights of the Round Table. Make sure that all the egos, because my business, the agency business, was full of egos, and I had to keep all those egos in check, and that was my role. But I just blinded myself to the hard times and just said, make this work. Do the right thing, make this work. You negotiate with people. You give them a call. Hey, you're paying in 90 days. I know. Let's talk about that. Let me tell you what's going on. Just be honest about it. I don't know. I never missed a payroll. I never missed a payroll.
Wow.
I mean, when I sold the business, I had 120 people. And all those years, I never missed a payroll.
Yes, incredible. I know in one of our earlier conversations, you talked about surrounding yourself with the right people was a part of your success. How do you feel about that?
I love them to this day. I'm very proud today to say that 6 of the top 10 agencies in Pittsburgh are, 5 of them are Blattner Brunner alums, leadership alums, and one of them was a client who I consulted for many years ago after I sold the agency. So six of the top 10 have Blattner Brunner influence. That to me is rewarding because it says I chose well. Then there's some other folks who, little single operators out there who are past alum. I don't know how many people were with us over the years. I always say about 1,000, but maybe it was only 800. I have no idea, but I harbor no ill will for 797. I don't know.
Yes. Well, we talked about this also, though. You gave credit to them, but I think it's incredible. I've been in management for a long time. It takes that leader to put that whole, as you said, game together and make that game move forward. So that does go back to you. You are a very talented man as well.
Truth be known, if you listen to what I said at the beginning of this conversation, I started this business when I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
So that means what? I started out of high school. I didn't go to college. I was not a media buyer. I was not an artist. I was not a writer. And I ended up at this thing called an advertising agency. Who the hell am I to be in an advertising agency? I have no qualifications. So if I didn't surround myself with people who understood all the functions and facets of the business, I wasn't in business. So I relied on these people to be expert. And they knew it and they loved it because they came to my business. I'll show you how it's done, Joe. And I'd say, go for it. Now, was I a smart enough guy to realize, no, I don't agree with you, Bobby? Yeah. But for the most part, I hired smart people with good credentials and treated them fairly and honestly and positively. And they gave it back to me that way. And I'm friends with them to this day. So
That's excellent. That's excellent for sure. A question here. What made you, because right, you were quitting your job. What made you pick this industry? What business?
Well, I didn't pick this business. It picked me.
Okay.
When I left the printing company, I opened a printing brokerage and called it Communications Inc. And we were brokering printing. I mean, there was 3,000 printing companies in Pittsburgh, and if you were a printing buyer with lots to do, and like one of our accounts was Pitt, and Pitt had he had 1,000 jobs to buy, and he didn't have the time to figure out what type of printer do I need for this kind of job, and that's what I did. I consider myself a printing engineer, self-taught printing engineer. I bought my own paper and bought my own film and bought my own pressmanship and bought my own bindery and put jobs together and did lots of them all at the same time. I became the best project manager you may ever meet. I am a really good project manager. But so I started as a printing broker, and then I met some guy who turned out to be a bandit. But bottom line is he taught me something called direct mail back in the days when direct mail was only thought of as junk mail. And that was in 77. I started the business in 74. In 77, we got into something called direct mail, and I began to understand that direct mail is not about printing. It's not about advertising. It's about mathematics. It's about if I send out 1,000 pieces to a certain kind of audience, what will happen and what's the results and how much money will return. This was a whole return on investment. And so I became early on one of the earliest experts in direct mail in Pittsburgh, back when nobody understood it. And I believed that direct mail was the way to get business to business. I believed it was a great business to business medium. And so did my customers. And then we brought on some interns from colleges in the area, and one had media interests and one had PR interests. and they started our media department and our PR department, and then the media department became our marketing department. Katie Bicknell was, a rock star for our organization way past after I sold the business. We're still friends today. I just called her the other day. But so we started taking on different kinds of practices, rolling out of from collateral printing to direct mail to advertising and media to PR to well, as it turned out, we ended up building about 23 different areas of expertise. And sometime in the late 80s, actually in 84, we decided to stop marking up and start selling our time instead of marking it up. And that was a change. That was technically the change when we became an agency in 84. And then we changed our name in 89 from Communications Inc. to Blattner Bruner because my partner believed that the name was hurting us. And we said our own names on it, not for ego purposes, but research ended up telling us he was right. So we changed our name, and we were one of the earliest agencies not charging commissions, not charging markups, but just charging for professional time. And we had all of these areas of practice. We had 23 areas of practice, 18 early on, 23 as it grew. No agency had that many areas. Most agencies did media, creative, account management, account planning, and maybe collateral. I mean, they did 5 things. We did 23 things.
Wow.
And we began to call that killer advertising. And so the concept that we provided killer advertising from the killer bees, which became a mantra, became a billboard, became boom. it just never stopped. And people would say, well, what is killer advertising? And we'd say, well, let's explain it. And we said it in the 23 practices. And what happened was only large clients could afford to look at which of the 23 practices interested them. And so we ended up only landing big accounts because big accounts said, hey, this is good. We did some research. We did a lot of research. And one of the pieces of research said that 47% of the large $1 million plus clients wanted the agency to integrate all the practice areas, and 53% wanted to control that. We went after the 47%, and we landed the clients left and right. And if you remember those days when we said Blattner landed this and Blattner landed that, which, by the way, Blattner didn't land any of them. Bruner landed them, but because it was called Blattner Bruner, Blattner landed this and Blattner landed that. And my wife would say, keep your head on your neck and not up your ass. But bottom line was, it was a good time. It was a good time.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Your studio at Gateway Center has been called Times Square. Coffee bars, couches, privacy pods. How that environment impact your creativity and culture? And who started that?
Yeah, it was one of the few I could pinpoint less than 5 things that I did. Because everything in my business life we did. But there was a few things that I did. One of them was creating open space that was fun to be in. And I created these fun spaces. And I spent a lot of capital to do it. But I figured out how to do that. And people loved it. And they just loved coming to work. And so and because we were an early adopter to the internet, we were also an early adopter so that people could play games over the internet. So they would work from 8 to 5 or 6 or 7 and then play from 7 to 10. My office was open 18 hours a day with the youngsters just staying and playing and enjoying the environment. And we had all this food there, and you could live in our place. And so people lived in our place. And so you didn't come to work. You came to play. You played during the day by work, and we had productivity results, and we helped people become productive. But when they worked hard, they worked hard. When they played hard, we supported it. It was okay. And so we created what became known as the best place to work. And because we had these open spaces and these great meeting spaces and all the technology driving in these spaces, clients came there. They found that they were happier coming to our place to do their work with their agency versus their account man or person who went to the client. So now what happens is the client comes to our place and we're talking to the account person that may be in there, or maybe there's one other writer in there or something with the client. And we start talking about what about? And the client says, well, maybe. And so 1 second. And we bring in Carol, bring in Bob, bring in Jim, bring in Ed. Next thing you know, he has this whole account team with all these different practice areas, throwing out ideas, generating brainstorming with the client in real time on the whiteboards with technology. And they're having a blast. What are they doing? They're spending money. They're spending money, hours upon hours upon hours. And that's how we built the business. So that fun place, that was designed to create so much energy that the clients would get sucked up in it and loved it. And they should have. It was just a good environment. So
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Which kind of leads me, obviously, COVID made people leave the workplace. But how do you think like hybrid workplaces now will change that modern, concept?
I sold the business 23 years ago. COVID happened 3 years ago. I told my real estate client when I was during my consulting years after I left the agency that because he was heavily invested in a lot of real estate, owning it, and I said, real estate's going to go backwards. No, not commercial. I said, yeah, it is. Why would you say that? You're an idiot. I said, no, because it can. Because technology is going to redefine place. I'm sorry to say I was right.
Yeah. How about this? Looking back, what's a move you made at your firm you wish you could revisit or do differently, if anything?
Well, I will tell you this. I never learned from my successes. I only learned from my mistakes and my failures. So you're asking me which of my failures and mistakes would I take away? You're asking me which of my events in life would I not want to learn from? I'm very honestly, I mean, I remember the reorganization. Boy, it was great. When everyone says, "Oh my God, what are you going to do?" and I said, "Sit down, I'll take care of it." And I did. I don't know. My greatest tragedies in life. I mean, even my partner and I splitting. I knew 5, 6, 7 years prior to that happening. We decided, he was great. Michael was a very talented man, still is, and I knew at some point he'd want to own what I own. I know he wanted my seat. My job was to keep him interested and engaged for as long as I could, and I did for 22 or 24 years together. And then he became my buyer, and I have no qualms. I don't. It's hard to sell an agency. When you sell a personal services business like an agency, they're hard to sell. I sold mine for one of the highest ratios of any agency in Pittsburgh because I had a controlled environment to sell to, and he paid me every nickel. And here I am 23 years later. I'm living the life of Oz. I have nothing to complain about. I always tell people if I die and come back, I want to come back as Joe Blattner. I really have nothing to complain about.
That's good. That's good. What do you think the current business owners may overlook now about culture or creativity?
Culture, nothing. I think they all realize culture is critical. I don't think any business owner in his right mind would think that to be damned with the employee, it doesn't matter. Right? I couldn't imagine, and if they do, they won't be around long. Creativity, I think a lot of people don't understand creativity. I didn't understand creativity. Remember, I'm not a creative guy, but I've come to learn just how important, how critical it is. And so here we are in a world of internet where you think, you want to be most seen, most touched, most felt on the internet. Who needs creativity? But the stuff that's getting most views and seen is most creative also. There's something we said for creativity, but then creativity for creativity's sake is a mistake. And how many commercials do you see, just using that as an example on TV, that if I said to you, who just advertised, you go, oh, I don't know, but it was a funny donkey show, And I sometimes test myself and say, who was that? What was that? So, and then you go to Affleck, you got a crazy duck, but who was it? It's Affleck. It's Affleck. But I still to this day witness people manage far more than they create. And I think they need to create far more than they manage. I witnessed in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah. So tell me if this is true. I was doing a little bit of research, and it seemed like a lot of firms back then was stuck in the analog and really believed in analog still. And you started moving them toward digital, and you kind of seem like you doubled down. Is that true? And what made you do that decision?
Well, it's one of those lucky things that happened. Back in 86, which 84 was the bad time, right? So I almost lost my shirt in 84 and turned it around. In 86 and 87, we were spending very heavily for a small firm on computerization, on automating a PC on every desk and soon thereafter a Macintosh on every artist's desk. And we were spending all this money to integrate these machines, and we were really struggling. And the board, which was my family, said, stop. And the accountant said, stop. You're spending too much money. You're not making enough money to do this. I said, we have to do it. And they said, we order you to stop. I said, okay. And I never stopped. I just do it. And we turned the business around on its own. And once we did, the automation was there and ready to serve because I never stopped. I don't know. I mean, we had a PC on every desk in 86. We had a Mac on every desk, on every artist's desk in 84, 85. I was told by my creative director, you can't create art on a machine. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, David, I'll put an art table, whatever you call it, back in the storage room. You can go back in the storage room at any time and use it if you like. You're getting a Mac. And, 7 months later, he was the greatest advocate of Macs anyone could have. Greatest creative person in Pittsburgh was David Bassat. God bless him. He took his life not too many years ago. But he was just he had David Bassat. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but David Bassat, who was our senior art creative guy, he won more Addies single-handedly 10 to 15 years running than the marketplace combined, year over year for 15 years. He was brilliant. And I picked him up back when he was a kid, and he was just a paste-up artist. And my Ann McFadden came aboard, and she said, you have no idea what this guy is. This guy's fantastic. And we didn't know it. And she took it, nurtured him, and created a monster. He was great. He was a wonderful person. Anyhow, so we automated, to your question, we automated the business back in 86 and connected it all up in 86, 87, and just spent heavily on technology in every way we could. And we believed that technology was going to drive my industry. And it's one of those guesses. We guessed right to not go with some machines. We went with IBMs and Macintoshes. We didn't go with some other brands that were cheaper. We didn't go with mainframes or minis that were cheap, was alluring back then. In fact, we were going to go with a mini system, and Katie came in the office one day and said, you're making a mistake. I said, what do you mean? It's a great machine, great system. She said, the world's going to PCs, and you're going to a mini. You're going backwards. She was right. I followed her idea. We did not go to the mini. It was a $50,000 decision back when we couldn't afford $50,000. And we didn't do it, not because of money, but because she was right. The world was going to PCs, and I was going to go to a mini. I was going backwards. So, so one of the things, we were going to not do PCs in the beginning. We were going to go with another organization, and we decided to not do that. And we're going to go with Microsoft's PCs. So I made some decisions, technology-wise, that just happened to be the right decision. I could have chose wrong. And really have paid for it dearly, as some people did. So luck comes to play, I think.
Yeah, I agree. But I also say that you make your own luck. And like you said, you surround yourself by good people, and they all gave you your input, and you made the right decision. So
I never felt that I always had the right idea. Sometimes I had the right idea, but usually I felt like, I can't say I ran my business by consensus, but I did listen. I did hear what people had to say. So
yeah, that's really good. What would you say to someone starting an ad agency today, facing the AI and remote teams and global competition? Any words of encouragement or advice?
The business is totally different. I mean, the business that I owned and sold it's no longer that business. So what we know the advertising agency business to be today is it's still an advertising agency business, but it's totally different. That the resources needed are totally different. I don't even know all the resources necessary. I even look at the president of the Bruner organization today, and it's not. It's looks. It physically looks like when I left it. Better. They've done a lot of improvements, look and feel wise, but what they do every day to work. People come to work and do different things today than I did back when I was in the business. So, and now you got AI. So who's going to be writing your copy today and tomorrow? It ain't going to be that brilliant copywriter. It's going to be AI, and then they're going to embellish it. And it's still going to come down to what's the great idea. And that's the thing that business people are going to miss is what's the big idea. AI is going to tell you what somebody else has done. You got to figure out what are you going to do to be different. Is there? I mean, I don't know. Listen. Ned's show and chemistry seem to be doing a great kick-ass job. I guess says his press. He's doing everything right that we were doing when we were building. And I see the playbook he's operating on, and I won't take credit for it, but I'm taking credit for it. I got his playbook. He's doing the right stuff. And Ned wasn't a believer in integrated marketing. He believed advertising was everything and everything else was bullcrap. Now look at him. He's doing exactly what we did. I'm sure I had nothing to do with that. It's hard when people tell me that their daughter or son's going into the ad business. Do I know of an advertising agency like to hire them? And I say, did they think about going into finance? I mean, it's hard to make a living. The average wage in advertising, I don't even know what it is today, but I should know it. I don't. But there's so many other fields that are a lot more encouraging.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the first half of the show we learned from you. I'd like to now switch me to learn a little bit about you. So tell me, first of all, over the next couple of years, what do you see? What have you been up to, and what do you see your next couple of years of future being like?
Well, my next couple of years are behind me. I've spent 23 years doing my next couple of years, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I have invented and launched 3 SaaS enterprises over the last 23 years. They are COMPackage.com, which is a total compensation statement platform online, a SaaS business, software as a service, SaaS, and then that came as an outcome of me selling the business and thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then I launched something called Class G that later became greenrated.org, and Greenrated is a sustainability checklist management process for companies who want to be running their facilities in a sustainable way. And then because of COVID, we went into emergency mode and launched cleanrated.org for business owners who want to operate a clean, healthy environment, workplace because of COVID. I'm on the back end of those industries now, and I enjoy COMPackage a lot. But if one of your listeners would like to buy an interesting SaaS enterprise, they're all for sale. I'm 71 years old. I've had a great run. I've loved every minute of it. I still enjoy it. But I figure, God willing, if I can sell them, someone may want me around for a year or 3, and I still have the year or 3 to give them today that I won't have 5 years from now. But that's what I've been doing, and there's reasons behind it. So you go back to what I told you in the very beginning about burn rate and technology. The businesses I'm in today all came with the lessons that I've learned back in the earlier days.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what made you kind of pivot? Obviously, you sold your company, but what made you pivot into SaaS businesses?
It's a funny story. I belong to YPO, Young Presidents Organization, great organization for people who qualify, and I qualified. And my forum, which is a group of 10 business owners like me, none of them in the ad business, we meet every month, and everyone talks about personal stuff and whatever they want to talk about. There's a structure behind it. And so when I brought up the fact that I wanted to sell the agency and my partner wanted to buy it, and we're going to go through it, and how should I do it, and should I do it, and da 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 da. And, we spent a lot of time on how to do it. And then they said, well, Joe, you're 49 years old. What are you going to do? You're not going to stop. What are you going to do? Because they knew I'm a driven guy. And I said, I don't know, guys. I'm going to find something or buy something that could grow enormously over the years to come, but with no employees, no receivables, and no cost of goods sold, and very, very low overhead. And they said, in foul language, you're freaking dreaming. And I said, that's my freaking dream. But I knew in 2003 about this thing called the internet. They didn't know. No one understood. In 2003, the internet was a toy. It had no broadband. It was some squawking, screeching boxes. But I knew the future of it was real. And I knew that vision of a no employee, no receivable, no cost of goods sold, low overhead business was possible. And if it was an internet-based business, that was the vision, to build an internet-based business. I didn't know when I got into these things that they would be called a SaaS enterprise. I knew nothing about SaaS. And they said, well, Joe, you are dreaming. That what you ought to do is consult, and something will pop out of that. You'll find your dream as you consult. And I said, why? You think anyone want me? I said, you crazy? You're Joe Blattner. Everyone wants to. I said, I don't know. I can't believe that. So we came up with this cockamamie story about how I was going to get into this senior living idea that I had half fleshed out, because the media wanted to know, what are you going to do now that I'm going to go into senior living. I forget what I call it. And my phone rang off the hook for 17 years. I was hired as a consultant, and I was Joe Blattner, so I was able to get whatever rates I wanted. It was ridiculous what I was getting. I just kept wondering if I could charge more. What happened if I charged more? Or maybe if I just, it was funny. But I had a good time. So I made a good living for 17 years consulting, which meant my job was to find middle-sized clients between $10 and $100 million size, and help them identify the nuggets in their business and how to leverage those nuggets. I became more strategic after I sold my agency than I ever was while I was at the agency. I became to realize I'd step in a situation and I'd identify the golden nugget early in that conversation. And then my job was to help the client find it. That I couldn't just tell him. I had to help him find it through our processes. And I did that for 4 or 5 clients year over year, and started doing it only on retainer, and clients would hire me on retainer, and they keep me for 3 to 7 years. And I did this for 17 years. And I made a nice, and I had a carve out on my deal with Brunner, that I could consult for any client who they weren't going after. So if they would go after the client, I just had to walk away. And I thought that will never happen. It happened once, but that's okay. So I walked away. But bottom line is I consulted for 17 years. And so one of my early retainer clients in consulting was the one who identified for me the total compensation statement opportunity. So COMPackage, in fact, did emerge out of that due diligence conversation with the insurance, I served that insurance company for several years until he died. God bless him, John Hare. And so the COMPackage was invented as an outcome of a conversation with the client. And I said, you ought to get into that business. He said, that's not our business. I said, okay, well then I just want you to know that I'm going to get into that business. He said, go for it. And so I invented COMPackage as a outcome, an exhaust fume of a conversation with Liberty Insurance, which is funny because the exhaust fume idea was what Herb Shear told me about Genco. Genco was an exhaust fume idea from a warehouse and trucking company he owned. He invented this multi-billion-dollar company called Genco, exhaust fumes. And then I picked up eventually the Byrne-Scalo business, the organizations, which is a funny story too, because there's twin brothers. One owned Byrne-Scalo Real Estate, one owned Byrne-Scalo Roofing. When they were totally separate businesses, and they're twins, and they look identical. In fact, they dressed identically. You'd think they call each other in the morning and say, are you wearing blue today or red? And when I first met them, I didn't know which one was which, even though one's my neighbor. But they had both. We ended up putting together a program where they would co-market the brands and then individually market the businesses or advertise. It was a neat program we put together, and I made them. The promise was I'll make you kill or be famous, and I did. Power of Two, and I served them for 5 years together, and then Jimmy came to me one day, the real estate business, and said, if I manage a building, a Class A building, sustainably, shouldn't it be rated higher than Class A? What did I know about sustainability? I knew nothing about sustainability. I knew nothing about advertising. So remember who I am. What do I know? And I said, I don't know. Should it? He said, well, yeah. I said, okay. He said, I think it should be rated Class G. And I said, okay, sounds right. He said, I think there's a business idea there. Why don't you take a look at that? Because you're in the SaaS business. Take a look at. So I did, and I came back to him after several weeks and said, yeah, I think we can build this into a $10 million enterprise over the next 7+ years. And this is how I do it. And basically go into my SaaS enterprise idea. And he said, it's great. Let's go do it. Next thing you know, it's people said to him, you can't do that, Jimmy. That's not what you do. That's what Blattner does. He does technology. He does, you're a real estate developer. He said, okay. He came back to me and said, what if we go 50-50? I'll put in half the cash. You put in half the cash. Everything you decide, I'll read anything you say. And you just run with it. And every time you need more money, you put in half. I put in half. And that's what we did. And we wrote this 50-50 agreement called Green and Good. And that launched Class G, that became green rated, that became clean rated. And we're still partners to this day and still friends to this day. So, but the businesses aren't doing any good. But, Trump just trying to shut down EPA and the whole clean COVID thing is all behind us. So here I'm 71 years old and I don't need it.
You mentioned it might be for sale. What would be like an ideal buyer, you think?
Several. One ideal buyer, and I've talked to a few, and they are interested, are people who own SaaS businesses. There's one guy who owns like 17 SaaS businesses, and to buy a bundled purchase to buy 3 more to put in and to plug them into his process because he already has. He has the SEO people, he has technology people, he has the marketing people. He has all these people in his cadre, and he just plugs businesses into them. So that'd be a great buyer. Another one would be, I believe, a national bank like a Wells Fargo or PNC. There's firms like MCOR as an example, but there are engineered services in building facilities, like in energy and waste and water and whatnot. National companies, and this green rated could help them find focus with their clients, and they could find clients from green rated. It'd be a great bite for them if somebody knew how to reach out to people like that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Take me back in time, little Joe. Did you know you'd be running and growing a company?
Yes. Well, no. When I was little Joe, after I got through wanting to be a fireman, I knew that I'd be a salesman, and I knew that. And then when my brother, who's 4 years older than me, was going through college and came out in '76, and there were no jobs because the 76, 77 recession was there, and they were all coming out of college, heavily laden with college debt, with no jobs, and I felt that pressure. And my daddy was a salesman. He died when he was 39 and I was 11, but I knew that I was a salesman. I wanted to be a salesman. I said, I don't have to go to college to be a salesman. And my brother and his friends, all smart kids, they went to college and they're going nowhere. So I said, I'm not going to go to college. I'm not going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a salesman. So I went out and found a job as a salesman.
Nice. Very nice. If you can go back in time and meet yourself the day you did found your company, what advice would you give yourself?
Just begin with the end in mind. I never did that. My partner did that. Bruner was a very strategic thinker, and he always used to insult me, I thought, and say, you're not strategic at all. You're so, you're just not strategic. And I used to be very insulted by that. But after I sold the business, I realized how strategic I wasn't. I never started with the end in mind. I'm always been process oriented. I always said, this is how do I begin? And I do A and B, C, D, and if I can get from A to C and escalate it and do it faster, that's good. I never figured out what was Z. I never thought about Z. Start with the end in mind.
Yeah, I like that advice for sure. What passions do you have? What do you do outside of work?
You see that bass guitar over there?
Yes, I love it.
I was a rock and roll musician back as a junior in high school, junior and senior, and I was a mediocre at the very, very best, a mediocre player, but we made money. I always made money in life. My cousin, who owns a music store in New York City, found out I was a rock and roll musician, and so he sent me a guitar and he sent me a bass, and so they were hanging in my office. And I picked up the bass, and I had no idea what to do with it. It was 53 years ago, and I just don't remember how to play it. So I started taking lessons. I have a piano in the other room. Don't know how to play it. I diddle with it. I don't even care about music. I just like playing music. I like playing an instrument. So I am now taking lessons for 6 months on the bass, and I'm actually getting pretty good. I'm a mediocre golfer. I have a 16 handicap, which is mediocre, better than most, worse than the guys I play against. And so I golf. When I'm actively engaged as a member of a country club, I'm golfing 3 to 4 times a week, which is more than most. I played 80 times last year. I won't play 10 times this year. So I golf. I play my bass. My wife and I go to the casino once a week, and we play for a few $100, and we leave. And now we're looking to move to Las Vegas and play golf year round and play my musical instrument year round and go to the casino whenever day we like and enjoy the sun. So our big plan right now is to clear the house and move to Vegas. I feel like Jed Clampett, moving on up, moving in the truck, moving to Beverly, moving to Summerlin.
Sounds exciting. Well, I will thank you. I can go on and on with you. I really enjoy learning from you, just talking to you in general. So thank you so much for being on the show, sir.
Well, thanks for having me. I've never done this, and so that was fun to tell the story as you asked the questions. It's great.
Yeah. So I want to thank the audience. If you learned something today or laughed, please tell somebody about the podcast. Again, Joe, thanks so much. This has been another exciting episode of Steel City Growth. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Steel City Growth. Thanks for joining us. For show notes and more, visit steelcitygrowth.live. Steel City Growth is proudly sponsored by Murphy Business of Pittsburgh, offering expert guidance in buying, selling, and valuing businesses to help you achieve your goals. Until next time.